Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's okay. The weather, glorious weather, is continuing here in the UK. So let's see who we have on today. So we've got Mr. Grant Staines in the house. Excellent.
Howdy.
We've got sneaked in the back door, Mark Linton. Just as I was saying good morning, he popped up. And ladies and gentlemen, with his brand new computer, Mr. Andy Moore. Look at the quality of that.
Morning, everyone. Oh my God!
You see how good is that?
He could come on networking events now. Look at it.
That is fantastic. So it's a big day for everybody today because we've got start your watch parties, everybody. We've got an announcement in the House and Commons that's happening in about 29 minutes. We can actually see. Look at this now. We can actually see the Commons. There it is.
Wow.
Nothing's happening yet, but the Health Secretary is taking questions. But if Johnson comes in and starts talking while we're still broadcasting, we will go live to BBC News, which is hosting the House of Commons news. So as Andy's on, and he hasn't really been on in a full capacity before, I think we're going to have just a general chit chat. Grant wants to talk about specifically what's been announced today. And Mark, you got anything specifics you want to talk about?
Yeah, I want to talk about the car parking situation that Birmingham City have found themselves in, and feeling that visitors to retail and restaurants will not suffer for their inadequacy. Sorry, I'm getting on my soap.
He's off already. Look at him.
Charging people. Yeah.
I do feel that sometimes Mark brings on his own personal grievances onto the show. I'd like to say that I often
therapy show.
The delivery driver was awful. Yeah, I just think sometimes he's like that.
I've said this before getting a ticket. So yeah, there you go.
Oh no, you got a ticket.
Oh, okay. Well, Mark, actually, you want to kick things off? Let's kick things off with Mark. Go on, Mark. Off we go.
Yeah, well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. So it's great news that the retail shops are now open, and we did a special report on this, on last Monday when they first started, and yesterday I was out on the high street again, and it looked really busy. But what didn't look busy was the actual shops themselves. A lot of businesses are still struggling with trying to get people through the door, making them feel at ease with the new procedures that you need to use the hand sanitizer when you go in. You've got a route around the store, and you've got to keep your social distancing. So my biggest issue here is having visited Birmingham and having living local in Gloucestershire, where the Gloucestershire County Council have taken the viewpoint of not putting car parking charges back into our local town, and if not into other areas of Gloucestershire, Birmingham City Council took the viewpoint that now the shops are open, we will start charging people. How ridiculous is that? You've got to ask yourself, if we're going to get the economy moving, if we're going to get people out of their homes, back into their cars, into the city centre, do not put obstacles in their way. I was unfortunate visiting the office for 2 hours and got a ticket thinking it was still free parking. Yes, that's a personal gripe. But at the same point, the shops weren't that busy in Birmingham. They weren't heaving. Yes, and we weren't expecting them to come back straight away be heaving. But at the same point, if a council is so strapped for money that they can't see the bigger picture, then they shouldn't be running the local council.
Well, there we go. I mean, you actually ran as a councillor, didn't you, Mark? Is that what you were?
Is this my re-election moment? Yes,
well,
I did.
I feel like it is. We should get some banners out, But I think it is ridiculous charging car parking as we're coming out of this COVID, and we're trying to get people back into the shops, to charging people to get into parking. It's ridiculous. I mean, is Touchwood, did anybody say that Touchwood is still free?
It is,
which is now local.
Yeah, all of Solihull is free at the moment. It was last week. I don't know whether it is this week, but it was last week.
The council has obviously taken that decision to see that the infrastructure is being put in place for people to get into the shops. And if you can't use public transport, because a lot of people are fearful of that, you can use your own car and they're not putting obstacles in their way. I just don't understand where Birmingham City Council are going with this.
Well, I've just got one thing to pick you up on there, Mark. You did know there was charging parking because we talked about it. So just because you're gonna put in, I didn't know, you knew.
Paid the fine. I kind of had a lapse moment. Obviously, I left the car parking thinking it was still free. You are right.
Done it, mate. We've
But
all done it.
yeah, I'm a visitor coming into the city centre. I didn't even know it was free until you told me it was free. So subconsciously, I thought to myself, oh, well, it's free parking because my local area is free parking. Solihull is still free parking, and Birmingham City is not.
But I think I said this a few weeks ago. The Birmingham City Council, which is the biggest council in Europe, is absolutely on its knees financially. You know, it's been publicised widely. So this whole thing to do with with the lockdown will have just screwed them even more. And I'll bet you their justification is they can't afford not to. And I know that's counterintuitive.
Yeah, this is the place I'm not bothered. No, I'm not. There are businesses, and Andy will tell you this because he's
the cheeky sod. You don't even pay business rates for Birmingham anyway. You live in bloody Tewkesbury.
Being paid.
Like you on this morning, this is
being still paid by businesses in the city, and yet they're screaming out and saying people aren't taking our grants, they're not taking the money. Well, you tried to take some of the money and they refused you. So come on, they've got this money sitting in that account. So don't get me started on where that money is going to be returned back to the government. I doubt very much.
It's covering their debts, mate.
Andy, what do you think we need to do to get people into the shops? What's your thought process on this?
In terms of getting people into the shops?
Well, yeah, because obviously the shops are all opening up. We need to get people in there.
Unfortunately, look, local and national politicians have been destroying town centres and city centres for decades. Obviously, it's worse now because of the pandemic. But, I took a client recently up to Bradford, and I took them to Stoke, recently, last year. And these are towns and cities that have been destroyed by local and national politicians with ill thought out policies, right, without thinking about the ramifications, right? And that's what the problem is. And now we've got the global pandemic and a pandemic on a local level, and still they want to charge parking charges, which are ridiculous. But it's no different to Sadiq Khan announcing a 40% increase in the congestion charge in London and blaming the central government. It wasn't the central government. It was the London mayor who decided on 40% increase. Again, crazy economic suicide and madness by inexperienced politicians who've never run anything, let alone a business. They couldn't run a business. And that's the issue. And what we've got to deal with here is that local politicians and national politicians have never had a proper job. And I'm about to launch, it's in for vetting at the moment by the government. On the government website, I'm launching a petition that all ministers should go to the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst for leadership training. And just in the history that people probably don't know who watch this program, and it's all connected to business, I said that this pandemic will bring out good leaders and very bad leaders. We have seen played out on TV some of our ministers as very bad leaders. But whose fault is that? It's actually the country's, because we don't give them any training. So I'm launching a petition when the government decides to sign off on it that says all ministers should go for officer training at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, where our greatest leader attended, called Winston Churchill, right? Because they give you leadership training, management training, and also decisions under duress. Now, as a former police officer myself, I had the benefit of leadership training under the old police force, which was effectively a quasi-military organisation. I also had leadership training under Ford Motor Company. I must say that were two different type of training, but that's another story. I hope you'll all support my petition. We want all of our ministers, including the Prime Minister, to go to Sandhurst, which is a military establishment that's been training officers and world leaders of over 120 countries for over 200 years. So they must be doing something right, unlike our politicians.
Hallelujah! We've got Andy Moore in. It's great.
I think what we've got is the biggest critique in the house right now. My wife is obviously not going to be on camera because she's just come back from a run, but she's a police officer, but also her brother is an ex-major, went to Sandhurst, and she's like, "What are you talking about, Sandhurst? Like, he couldn't even like organise a button."
Actually, funny enough, what they do teach at Sandhurst, by the way, Mark, is they actually teach you how to wash, iron, and sew your uniforms. So actually, that is wrong. Obviously, if he didn't pick it up, well, that's his fault. But they do teach you how to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah, we all know officers can do all that, and I'm not disgracing my officers, but at the same time, I will say that yes, they possibly could do it, but they never did. Especially when they got the dizzy heights of their colonel.
Then they've got an assistant, or it used to be called a Batman, but I don't call them a Batman anymore. Probably illegal now. But that's what they used to have to do all their washing, ironing, prepare their uniforms, etc., etc., etc. Even in war, they had one. So there we go.
Amazing. I do have this banner obviously ready. I was going to use it a bit later, but that's what we'll be using that banner many a time today, I think. So
no, I just saw that. I didn't say.
Yeah.
I think that would.
I like that. Yeah,
that would be a disaster because he just keeps sacking everyone.
Yeah.
No, he keeps sacking everybody until he gets it right. That's the thing. You got to get all the way through it.
It's quite interesting what we and talking about that, what we're seeing about, and we're talking about leadership, what we see played out in front of us on the screens every day throughout this pandemic. And it's what I've always said in businesses, as being a chairman, CEO of 13 listed companies on the London Stock Exchange. I always say it. Look, no man or woman is bigger than the company, and the same goes for a country, even more so. And the fiasco we saw with Dominic Cummings was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, and it just contributed to the worldwide opinion. And I've talked to many people from the West and the East of the world who have all said the same, that we have been made to look a laughing stock by our government. And I'm sorry to say, the truth hurts. You may not like that, and you may think we're doing a fantastic job. If you do think that, I would suggest you just get online and read the stories from other countries. I was talking to, some of you know him, Simon Cooper, who lives in the Bahamas, who have had 6 deaths from the pandemic, population about 750,000. Their prime minister is actually a medical doctor. They locked down early. They lock people up. Not only do they lock down early, they lock people up who break the lockdown, and they put them into some sort of detention facility if they don't. And they also fined people, I think it was, don't quote me exactly, $1,000. And it's worked. 6 deaths, very little cases. Their economy is virtually reopened. They even had, and may still operate, a curfew from dusk to dawn or something like that. So it may sound alien, but that is how you cure it. We are still getting 1,000 new cases a day of coronavirus, which is quite a lot, isn't it? It is a lot, and it's a lot more than other countries. Half my family, as some of the panelists know, live in Australia. My daughter's there; she's been there 7 years. Australia had 105 deaths, and before everybody said, "Oh, it's a much bigger country," that's because they've never been there and they're ill-informed. Sydney has a population of 5.5 million people. That is bigger than any of the other cities except London in the UK. Their second city in Australia, Melbourne, has a population of 4.9 million, right? Again, bigger than any other single city in the UK. So it's no good saying that Australia as a bigger country. Yes, it is, but all the population is centred around the East Coast mainly, and a big city on the West Coast, which is Perth. So that's what we're talking about. What they've done, they've locked down the country early. They locked down the country very early. More importantly, they locked down the airports and incoming passengers, which we didn't. It's now without doubt that is the single biggest cause. And I actually wrote an email to my local MP and other elected representatives telling them that they should do this in late March, early April. And as usual, it fell on deaf ears because the government thought they knew what they were doing, because they were listening to one person, Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings is one person. He's never run a business. He's never run a country, and he's a chief advisor. I'm saying he should be fired, not for breaking the lockdown, but because he presided as chief advisor to the Prime Minister, and now we're looking at an official death toll of over 42,000 people. That's why he should be going, not because he broke his lockdown. And, you know, previously, under Theresa May, when we had that ill-fated election that she lost her majority, two of her chief advisors were fired because they lost a few seats in Parliament on an election that the Conservatives still won. And we're talking about a guy that is the chief advisor that presided over the biggest disaster known in the history of the UK since World War II, 42,000 odd deaths, and he's still in a job. I'm sorry. You have to fire people, and that's where Boris Johnson needs some leadership training to be tough.
Well, talking about Boris Johnson, obviously he's going to be on his feet in about, hopefully in about 15 minutes' time, which is going to talk about releasing the lockdown a little bit more today. He's doing the thing in Commons at 12:30, and then he's talking to the public at 5 o'clock for normal briefing. So Grant wants to talk about how this is going to affect businesses going forward, because Grant has lots of connections with pubs, and they've built lots of apps for that type of thing. So what's your take on this, Grant? How is this going to happen moving forward?
Can I just respond to some of the stuff Andy said first?
Oh, okay. Then I was trying to move it on, but carry on.
I quite like having a debate with Andy about
yeah, we know. Go on then.
Sorry, mate, you're not getting away with that one. Something that I think is quite an interesting idea, and something that I would like to debate, is that from a political point of view, as Andy points out often, politicians aren't necessarily trained to be politicians. They're, you know, as often he's quoted, a lot of politicians are either career politicians, or they are, you know, not necessarily from any kind of what you would call a qualifying background. I think occasionally you get people who are economists, don't you, and business owners, etc. But what I want to just sort of talk to Andy about and get you other guys' opinion is this idea of training politicians to become qualified as leaders and decision making. Because I'm reading a book at the moment that is absolutely fascinating, called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, who is an ex-Navy SEAL who's went on to become an ultra marathon runner. So he's a super high performance guy. And a lot of the stuff that I'm reading, listening to on Audible, listening to at the moment, is about the way the military trains people to become mentally strong, physically strong, and how the two things go hand in hand. Now, over the last few weeks, politicians, you know, especially the cabinet, in every country, have been under the most pressure they could ever possibly imagine, other than a war footing. It's probably been quite similar, you know, to a war footing. And I just wonder, and I don't know whether you know the answer to this, Andy, you know, how are they trained to deal with that? How are they trained to, because, you know, it's not something that comes natural. You know, it's.
Well, let's put it this way, if I can respond to that. When I was a parliamentary candidate and I was involved in politics, the local political parties will give you some media training, right? Yeah. They will give you some media training, and what will happen is that that's about the most you'll get. We actually don't formally train our politicians. Even our MPs get no formal training. They're reliant on what they can get from their own parties, what they can learn on the job, so to speak. And ministers then are put into a job, and it's supposed to be the civil servants around them and the advisors who also advise them and how to deal with matters. However, that may be okay, but another phrase I've used for many years in business surround yourself with yes men, or as it is now, yes people, right? You're only going to get one answer, and the answer is going to be yes. The problem is that if you're a leader and you've got people around who are only going to say yes to you, you're never going to get a true objective view and make a considered decision in leadership terms. You need people around you who are going to say no, have a different opinion, and different type of people. So our system actually is flawed. And I'm 61 now. I've been in politics for 30 odd years, on and off. And I've been members of 3 political parties. What we've got is a situation where we've got a flawed system because we don't train our people in leadership. Hence my petition, because Sanders will teach them about leadership. It will teach them about decisions. It'll even teach them about how to conduct themselves with honour and dignity, right? As an officer in Her Majesty's Armed Forces should do. So that's a starting point, right? But it's also, we've got to look at their advisors. Give you an example. The special advisors to ministers are not selected like you select anybody for a job, other job, right? They're selected as favours, as thank yous to people from the party. Dominic Cummings is a chief advisor because he won the Brexit election campaign and then he came in and won the election, right? Dominic Cummings is not qualified in any way, shape or form to advise the Prime Minister how to run a country, right? He's never run a business. He's never run anything, to my knowledge. Please feel free to correct me, anybody. But that is how their special advisors are actually selected. Whereas what we should be doing is putting the special advisors to the ministers through the public appointment system that we've got in place for other public appointments. So if you want to be the chief executive of HMRC, for instance, you will go through a public appointments process, be vetted by independent people and all sorts of interviews, right? Why aren't we doing this for our special advisors? Because if our advisors are no good, guess what chance of the ministers and the Prime Minister being of any good? You answer that.
I find from personal experience, be it only local government, that it was a case of like, welcome, you know, I got co-opted on, so it was interviewed by other councillors, but ultimately when you got there, it was a case of, right, have you read the charter? Have you read this? Well, where do you go and find this information? You were, as you say, Andy, you were left on your own to work it out as to what was right and what was wrong and what you should be doing. There's always the governance behind what you can do as a councillor or an MP, and yet, often people get elected and thrown into a situation where they have got no clue because no one, and sadly it is, everyone is just buying for their own position. So they don't want to share information with you for the fear that you'll take their role next time, especially local here for councils. I'm sure that's the same across the country. It's like, because you've got so many tiers. So you got from where I was, which was local town council, parish council. Then you had the borough councillors who got paid expenses. Then you had county councillors going on, and that was a problem. You had a whole issue where they were fearful that you would be elected over and above them and you take away their revenue. And that is a sad state of affairs.
Yeah.
Can I just...
on the floor, and what we've seen it laid bare in the worst possible conditions is in the global pandemic. I must say a little bit of a thank you while I'm on the air about the leader of Solihull Council, who is one of the leaders that I actually think has done a decent job and is proven to be a decent leader and made decisions. And the leader of Solihull Council is Ian Courts. If he's listening or anybody knows him, I believe he's done a good job. Parking charges, you mentioned earlier, parking charges in Solihull, as Grant has said, there are no parking charges, right? And that is where it should be at the moment.
Can I just ask you a quick question, Andy? So we've got some questions coming in on Facebook here, and I know your expertise is finance and help that way. Mandeep has questioned in. He says, "What help can limited companies get?" I know it's just jumping around a little bit here, but what help can limited companies still get at the moment?
The bounce back loan is still available at the moment.
Sorry, he said he's actually said. Let me just read on. Actually, he's just put something else on. I won't put it up on screen because it'll block it all off. He says he's opening up a cafe and a ladies' fashion shop. He's had no success with the bounce back loans because he's got an online banking system. I wonder what banking system he's with. It could be that could be Tide or Starling. So, sorry. So what could he apply for other than the bounce back loan?
Well, obviously, I'm an agent for the startup loan, which is very important at the moment. However, just a few facts surrounding that. Franchise inquiries across the UK are up 68% on last year's inquiries because of the pandemic and people being made redundant and people thinking they haven't got a job to go back to after furlough ends. So, and also people who've been in lockdown are just reviewing their options and their life ahead of them, right? So, first of all, that's everybody's looking at starting their own business. The government startup loan, equally so, has had a massive influx of new applications, which has been borne out by the time it's now taking to get approvals. Our approvals have gone from, used to get approvals in 24, 48 hours. It's now a week, right? And that is because, and I spoke to our team yesterday in Gateshead, who are working remotely. They've got a massive amount of applications going through, but it's still available. It's up to £25,000. It's not as low interest rates as a bounce back loan, which is 2.5%. This is 6%. You don't get a 12-month holiday like you do on the bounce back loan, but you do get you can apply for a 3-month holiday, right? And that is the government startup loan. It's backed by the government. As I said, I'm an agent for one of them, and I help you through the process because it is, as in all government processes, you have to jump through a few hoops. But we've streamlined the whole process to make it simple. It's up to £25,000 as long as the business has not been in existence for more than 2 years.
So Mandeep, I've actually what I've done, Mandeep, is actually put Andy's email address up on screen there. So if you want to drop him an email, and he'll be able to fill you in completely on that. That's I feel like I'll be doing a community service, and that's great, isn't it? This is how it should be. So, Grant, Boris is still not showed up at House of Commons yet. So, do you want to just run through what you wanted to speak to, or unless you want to come back on what Andy's been saying, or do you want to just run on what you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, we haven't got much longer now. It was just I'm waiting with anticipation to see what Boris comes up with today, because most of the people that I'm dealing with that are in the leisure industry, pubs and restaurants in particular, are kind of making plans based on what we think is going to happen. And at the moment, we're hoping that in the UK, social distancing is going to be brought down to 1 metre. And that there's going to be some guidelines given around the way that we can open up our pubs and restaurants. Now, they did something similar in Ireland last week, Southern Ireland, that is, which was quite unexpected, actually. The reason this is of great interest to me is a lot of my clients are pubs and restaurants, and that we build apps and websites for them. And the way that the apps work are going to be absolutely fundamental to the way that they trade. So food ordering and drinks ordering from a table through your own phone using an app is going to become, the norm. But the sort of idiosyncrasies of way that the government sort of specify how that can happen are going to be fundamental to the way that we develop our apps. So it's a big deal for us, because the quicker we can get the functionality working for pubs, the better. But of course, we've been waiting now for a few weeks to find out what that is. And there's always a development time that goes into place prior to actually, rolling it out. And then we don't know how long it's going to last for. So there's lots of stuff around the technology here that we need to get sorted. And that's why what's about to be announced is going to be a big deal for us. And because it's going to be the difference between some businesses making it through and not. And with Ireland, for example, they've said, if you're going into a pub, I think you can spend an hour and a half in the pub. You have to order more than £9 worth of food if you want to order alcohol. So you've got the whole thing about managing time in the pub, having a limit on the amount that is spent, and then unlocking the ability to order alcohol, which, making a cheap, affordable app for en masse for businesses in Ireland to do that is challenging. So if they come up with something similar in the UK, you know, we've got our work cut out. But obviously we'll do it. But we've got to get to work to figure out how we can leverage that through an app. Because of course, if we don't, it's going to be a bit of a shambles. Because if they do come up with something that complicated, by the time we've built the app, they'll probably have changed it again.
Yeah.
Well, I think to be honest, Grant, because obviously I think it's commendable what you do with restaurants, with your business, but they're going to be in the same situation as the retail. They're going to know last minute what to do, and who is going to pay for all the re-signs from 2 meters to 1 meter.
Well, it's going to. I mean, the Hollywood Monster have obviously done a lot of the 2 meter signs, and it's going to be what they're going to class it as. I think it's going to be 1 meter plus. That's what they're going to say. So it is. They're still going to recommend 2 meters is what you need, but if it has to go down to 1 meter, then it is allowed to. But it's 1 meter plus. That's what they're going to call it.
Can I just come in on my simple design?
Yeah, I was going to say, can you give us your pub design of the mask?
I did this actually in March because I've been wearing masks since March, right? As a veteran of the SARS 2003 crisis and the pandemic, the small pandemic that was just focused in Hong Kong and Asia, right? Masks are so important. Masks will stop the spread, right? And anybody that doesn't believe that needs a head looking at. And the fact is, it's common sense. Put a barrier between the bacteria or the droplets come from the coughs, sneezes, or speaking, and you will lessen the effect. It's common sense. That's why they put it at perspex screens. However, but in a pub, you might have a problem. But here's a simple device I did design myself. This is a mask. This is an FP1 mask, actually. The World Health Organization recommend the FP2, but this will do the job. Not as effective. The FP2 is for health workers. But I've inserted a straw through the mask. All that needs to be done then, is just a little bit of domestic sealer, like a bathroom sealer, around the inside or on the outside. And then you have an effective method to wear a mask in a pub with a straw and drink your drink, right?
Can you demonstrate that, mate? Put it on so we can see what it looks like.
Put it on, I will, certainly.
Please. Thank you.
And there we have it. There's my straw. I've actually used this in a pub before the lockdown to demonstrate it, right? Any size of it, it's ever so simple. Just put a bit of sealant on it, and there you have your straw, and you've got some protection. Obviously, there's no such thing as 100% effective. And you may say, well, you can get some virus through that end. Well, obviously, if there's only one alternative, don't go to the pub or wear a mask and don't have a drink. It's entirely up to you. But this is ever so simple. Masks are readily available, straws are readily available, and a household sealant, like a bath or an acrylic sealant on the inside, seals around the straw, and you're sorted. Ever so simple.
I don't know why that hasn't gone into mainstream. Hopefully, Boris will mention.
They're widely available now on andymore.com.
No, they're not actually.
$9.99.
I haven't shown it to many people. It really is a simple process. Now, people may think you look a bit stupid, but I say
no, you don't. No.
People used to say that to me when I was the first one in Sainsbury's in Dorridge wearing a mask. Oh, Andy, aren't you embarrassed? Well, I'd rather be embarrassed than dead.
That's very true.
I don't think there's much choice in that, is there?
Can I just say that the dipping of the straw is what I'm concerned about, because normally you put your head down into the straw and then come away but you've got the straw continually in your mouth. Yeah,
well, obviously, depending on the length of the straw on the side, you can move it up and down in the hole that is sealed, because that sealant will be able to is a good enough sealant. Or somebody could come up with an idea to put a rubber grommet in there that seals around the straw.
You've really thought about this. You really have.
Other ideas on that. That's just a simple what I did myself.
Right. I think you'll find that Boris is on there.
Yeah, no, I'm just watching it. He's just saying a few bits and pieces.
So what I'm saying,
I'll tell you what, Boris will be glad when the hairdressers are open, won't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to go over to Boris now because he's about to update. So if anybody wants to jump off, we'll see you again tomorrow. But this is Boris Johnson live at the House of Commons.
Trusted in the common sense and perseverance of the British people, and their response has more than justified our faith. Since I set out our plan on the 11th of May, we have been clear that our cautious relaxation of the guidance is entirely conditional on our continued defeat of the virus. In the first half of May, nearly 69,000 people tested positive for COVID-19 across the UK. By the first half of June, that total had fallen by nearly 70% to just under 22,000. The number of new infections is now declining by between 2 and 4% every day. 4 weeks ago, an average of 1 in 400 people in the community in England had COVID-19. In the first half of June, this figure was 1 in 1,700. We created a human shield around the NHS, and in turn, our doctors and nurses have protected us. And together, we have saved our hospitals from being overwhelmed. On the 11th of May, 1,073 people were admitted to hospital in England, Wales and Northern Ireland with COVID-19. By the 20th of June, this had fallen by 74% to 283. This pandemic has inflicted permanent scars, and we mourn everyone we have lost. Measured by a 7-day rolling average, the number of daily deaths peaked at 943 on the 14th of April. On the 11th of May, it was 476. And yesterday, the rolling average stood at 130. We've ordered over 2.2 billion items of protective equipment from UK-based manufacturers, many of whose production lines have been called into being to serve this new demand. And yesterday we conducted or posted 139,659 tests, bringing the total to over 8 million. And while we remain vigilant, we do not believe there is currently a risk of a second peak of infections that might overwhelm the NHS. Taking everything together, we continue to meet our 5 tests, and the chief medical officers of all 4 home nations have downgraded the UK's COVID alert level from 4 to 3, meaning we no longer face a virus spreading exponentially, though it remains in general circulation. The administrations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland hold responsibility for their own lockdown restrictions, and they will respond to the united view of the chief medical officers at their own pace, based on their own judgment. But all parts of the UK are now travelling in the same direction, and we will continue to work together to ensure that everyone in our country gets the support they need. Thanks to our progress, we can now go further and safely ease the lockdown in England. At every stage, caution will remain our watchword, and each step will be conditional and reversible. Mr. Speaker, given the significant fall in the prevalence of the virus, we can change the 2-meter social distancing rule from the 4th of July. I know this rule effectively makes life impossible for large parts of our economy, even without other restrictions. For example, it prevents all but a fraction of our hospitality industry from operating. That's why almost 2 weeks ago, I asked our experts to conduct a review, and I will place a summary of their conclusions in the libraries of both houses this week. Where it is possible to keep 2 meters apart, people should. But where it is not, we will advise people to keep a social distance of 1 meter plus, meaning they should remain 1 meter apart while taking mitigations to reduce the risk of transmission. And we're today publishing guidance on how business can reduce the risk by taking certain steps to protect workers and customers. And these include, for instance, avoiding face-to-face seating by changing office layouts, reducing the number of people in enclosed spaces, improving ventilation, using protective screens and face coverings, closing non-essential social spaces, providing hand sanitizer, changing shift patterns so that staff work in set teams. And of course, we already mandate face coverings on public transport. While the experts cannot give a precise assessment of how much the risk is reduced, they judge these mitigations would make 1 meter plus broadly equivalent to the risk at 2 meters if those mitigations are fully implemented. So either will be acceptable and our guidance will change accordingly. And this vital change enables the next stage of our plan to ease the lockdown. And Mr. Speaker, I'm acutely conscious that people will ask legitimate questions about why certain activities are allowed and others are not. And I must ask the House to understand that the virus has no interest in these debates. Its only interest, its only ambition is to exploit any opportunities to recapture ground that we might carelessly vacate and to reinfect our communities. And so there is only one certainty: the fewer social contacts you have, the safer you will be. And my duty, our duty as the government, is to guide the British people, balancing our overriding aim of controlling the virus against our natural desire to bring back normal life. We cannot lift all the restrictions at once, so we have to make difficult judgments. And every step is scrupulously weighed against the evidence. Our principle is to trust the British public to use their common sense in the full knowledge of the risks, remembering that the more we open up, the more vigilant we will need to be. From now on, we will ask people to follow guidance on social contact instead of legislation. In that spirit, we advise that from the 4th of July, 2 households of any size should be able to meet in any setting inside or out. That does not mean they must always be the same 2 households. It will be possible, for instance, to meet one set of grandparents one weekend, the others the following weekend. But we are not recommending meetings of multiple households indoors because of the risks of creating greater chains of transmission. Outside, the guidance remains that people from several households can meet in groups of up to 6, and it follows that 2 households can also meet regardless of size. Mr. Speaker, I can tell the House that we will also reopen restaurants and pubs. Hallelujah. All hospitality indoors will be limited to table service, and our guidance will encourage minimal staff and customer contact. We will ask businesses to help NHS Test and Trace respond to any local outbreaks by collecting contact details from customers, as happens in other countries, and we will work with the sector to make this manageable. Almost as eagerly awaited as a pint will be a haircut, particularly by me, Mr. Speaker, and so we will reopen hairdressers with appropriate precautions, including the use of visors. We also intend to allow some other close contact services, such as nail bars, to reopen as soon as we can when we're confident they can operate in a COVID-secure way. From the 4th of July, provided that no more than 2 households stay together, people will be free to stay overnight in self-contained accommodation, including hotels and bed and breakfasts, as well as campsites, as long as shared facilities are kept clean. Most leisure facilities and tourist attractions will reopen if they can do so safely, including outdoor gyms and playgrounds, cinemas, museums, galleries, theme parks, and arcades, as well as libraries, social clubs, and community centres. Close proximity venues, such as nightclubs, soft play areas, indoor gyms, swimming pools, and spas will, I'm afraid, need to remain closed for now, as will bowling alleys and water parks. But my right honourable friends, the Business and Culture Secretaries, will establish task forces with public health experts and these sectors to help them become COVID secure and reopen as soon as possible. We will also work with the arts industry on specific guidance to enable choirs, orchestras, and theatres to resume live performances as soon as possible. Recreation and sport will be allowed, but indoor facilities, including changing rooms and courts, will remain closed, and people should only play close contact team sports with members of their household. Mr. Speaker, I know that many have mourned the closure of places of worship, and this year Easter, Passover, and Eid all occurred during the lockdown. So I'm delighted that places of worship will be able to reopen for prayer and services, including weddings with a maximum of 30 people, all subject to social distancing. Meanwhile, our courts, probation services, police stations, and other public services will increasingly resume face-to-face proceedings. Wraparound care for school-age children and formal childcare will restart over the summer. Primary and secondary education will recommence in September with full attendance, and those children who can already go to school should do so because it is safe, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we will publish COVID-secure guidelines for every sector that is reopening, and slowly but surely these measures will restore a sense of normality. After the toughest restrictions in peacetime history, we are now able to make life easier for people to see more of their friends and families, and to help businesses get back on their feet and get people back into work. But the virus has not gone away. We will continue to monitor the data with the Joint Biosecurity Centre and our ever more effective test and trace system. And I must be clear to the House that, as we have seen in other countries, there will be flare-ups.
So you listen to Boris Johnson, who is talking live in the House of Commons today. You're on the Small Business Support Growth Network. We're just going to Mark is still hanging about, so I'm just going to bring him on. Let me just mute my end because Boris is still talking in my headset. So bear us 1 second. There we go. So Mark, thanks for hanging on. Grant's had to jump off, but so just briefly, it looks like from the 4th of July, the 1 meter plus rule is going to come into action, which is fantastic. 2 households to meet inside and outside, and you can vary the households, but not, be sensible is the key here, isn't it? And also something he slipped in there, which I don't know if anybody picked up on. This is no longer law; it is only guidance. This is guidance.
And that was interesting, that guidance, because obviously the law always picks about common law and what is legislation, and obviously common law and guidance is all about what is the president and people put in place as to what is legislation. So it will be about people using their common sense. It will be about what is seen as the norm. Obviously, at the same point, I think what he was saying there, you would have to put the brakes on. Should we go back into such a stage that the figures start rising again?
Well, this is common sense, though, isn't it? This is what it's all about. Because I mean, it really is, because I mean, I know Andy was talking about South Australia earlier, but they've had sections have gone back into lockdown because they've had a flare up, and we are going to get flare ups, you know. And it's Germany's had a flare up, but the area that the flare up is, they've put into lockdown, which is the perfect way of doing this and not to lock down the whole country. Obviously, pubs, restaurants, they want to recommend table service and reduce the staffing levels there, which is fine. Barbershops can open. Now, he mentioned campsites. Now, obviously, Wales is different. I have a big connection in Wales with a caravan site there. So does this mean caravan sites can open in England? You never mentioned anything campsites.
Interesting enough, a couple of friends are going away on the 4th of July. And obviously, or that weekend, they had already planned it to do that. So you can use communal areas as long as they're kept clean. I think every camper will be over the moon by the idea that extra cleaning is going to be taking place in communal areas.
To be honest, I don't know. I'm not a big camper. I love me caravans. I love me static caravans. Thank you very much, but I'm not a camper, so I don't really care. Theatres also, they're looking to open those from the 4th of July as well. So I think this is all good. It's all going to get back into a little bit of normality. They never mentioned you, Mark. They never said about networking meetings, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, what I read from that is you would book a restaurant just like anyone else. It's just going to be table service. So what we'd have to do is just change a little bit of how we're doing it. We're going to have that non-contact, extra cleansing. But you just move people around. You just say, right, your starters here.
Wouldn't the logical way to be, and we've done it when we've had these meetings, is just have one long table and probably take out a chair between people. So, you know, and you got everybody sat down, and that's where everybody has a chat. Okay, you won't be able to mingle as much. As such.
But, what we try and do is we try and work with venues who've got a bit of outside space, so you get a whole approach of where you're outside, you can be distancing with small amounts of people and just work on that. Like you've got two different types of groups, and then filter people through, as you say, to sit down, but then they're sitting down and that's all they're doing.
No, that's right.
I
think we're good.
I mean, businesses like mine and restaurants, hospitality, all of this will work through this because that's who we are. That's the approach we'll need to take. This is a guideline. We have to take the guidelines.
This is what we need. This is what we need because we got a couple of weeks, well, about a week and a bit, haven't we, before the 4th of July. So this gives everybody plenty of time to get stuff ready. I think a lot of the pubs, I know the Green King pubs have already started working anyway. And obviously that's a Drum and Monkey around the corner for me, which is, they've already started sorting that. So I think this is a good thing to give everybody enough time to sort it out. And I think it's a way forward. And, if you have a flare up, that's fine.
That's it. Because where I live and all the rest of it, we've got a lot of gardens, pubs with gardens. We've got a lot of riverside areas where people can sit. These people, especially Wetherspoons, are going to take this approach that they've got to get back to normal.
Yeah, no, definitely. It just means the boyfriends and girlfriends can now start coming back round to each other's houses.
Oh, I bet you're looking forward to that.
Oh, well, great. Loving it. Anyway, Mark, thanks for sticking with us. And it's been a great show. So, everybody, we'll see you tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.